for the homework number 7, I think.
Okay.
Can I just
Take
share
a
my
look.
screen, or can I just show the question?
Well, let's. It's normally better if I share my screen.
Okay.
So,
Oh, yeah.
so I'll do. Hold on a minute. Can you see? You can see Ignition now.
Yes. Okay.
So 7. Which one was it?
I think it was number 5. It was asking me about the change of quantity traded.
Okay. Yeah, and I think we kind of like talked about this, but go ahead and tell me. So we have the supply shift that's illustrated. Boom.
So I know how to find like the change, but I think I got the wrong answer because I put a negative in front of my answer, or I think either I put a negative quantity, because I think when we do problems that ask us to find the price trade changes, I think it says that the change is always positive. Is that correct? So like,
Well, no, I don't think so. And I would love, but let's just think about this a little bit here, right? So the question says we got supply and demand. Consider the shift in supply illustrated. So we got a reduction in supply. How much does the quantity traded change? Well, we're going from here, which is the equilibrium quantity of 8.22 units, right? To 7.56 units. So that's a reduction, right? So I would think that should be a negative number. So you want to do 8.22 minus 7.56, or 7.56 minus 8.22 to make sure we get a negative, right?
Because I thought the correct answer is negative, but the reason I bring this up is because I put a positive answer, because in the problems that ask for a change in price, the answer is still positive, even if it's a reduction in price.
Well, you have to give me an example. I mean, like, so here we agree it should be negative.
Yes.
Because it's a reduction, but give me the other one.
Okay, this, I saved an image of it. I can't, it's hard to do this without showing my, it was number 5.
Oh, on which homework?
It was on the same homework 7. Or, I mean,
okay.
Practice for 7. It was practice for 7.
Practice for 7, okay, hold on, wait a minute. Let me do this, I'll open up another tab. And so I'm gonna put this here. And practice for 7. I mean, because it could be, so anyway, so it's number 5 on here on the practice?
Yes. Price.
Okay.
Yes, there it is.
Okay. So how much does the price change? Well, here, right, it's actually an increase in price, right? Oh. So that's kind of like the point, is the price increases, which is a positive change, but the quantity goes down.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense to me, because I figured that since it was like it was shifting backwards, I thought it was decreasing. Oh, but the quantity just decreases.
Yeah.
The quantity decreases.
And I don't know, but the price increases. Yeah, I don't know if that's kind of intuitive to you or not. Like obviously to me, but gosh, I was an econ major, master's PhD. I've been doing it for like my whole life, of course, right? Yeah, like to me it makes sense, but I think even before, when way back when I first thought about this stuff, it kind of made sense to me. And this is actually what's going on right now. So I don't know if you read, some professors actually require their students to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. And if I require it, then you get like a reduced student discount rate. I forget if it's like $10 or $15 or $20 for a year, or for 6 months or something like that. But whether you do or don't, like you might be able to see some of the articles from their page, and maybe they give you some deal or something. But right now, what everybody is talking about is this thing they're labeling, which is not an official thing. I mean, it may be someplace in some econ book from the 1950s or 60s or whatever, but it's not like something we commonly teach. But this is what they label it. They're calling it the bullwhip effect. Sounds pretty nice, right? Bullwhip effect. Very, I don't know. There is such a thing as a bullwhip. I don't know if you've seen like Indiana Jones, but
Yeah, I
that
have.
big long whip. That's his bullwhip, right?
Uh-huh.
So, which I guess like back in the day, people used it, and maybe they still do for whipping bulls. I don't know why, that's like was its main purpose, but so what happened is a lot of manufacturers, because of COVID, they shut down, and the economic effects of the shutdown initially were really, really bad. I mean, it depends upon how you look. Normally we measure employment like month over month, and it's like delayed, and there are standard things that kind of interfere with employment. Normally it's a winter weather. A lot of construction industry shuts down in the northern and eastern part of the country because of the cold weather, and they can't restart. So you get these standard kind of unemployment effects. Unemployment rises in the winter just because people can't work outdoors if they have an outdoor occupation. Anyway,
Just
the main. Oh,
so
go ahead.
I wanted to chime in on the number 5 problem because I fell to the same thing. And just to let you know, the part that probably confuses a few of us is that the question asks how much does the price change, and how much is referred to as an absolute term. So you could say like, I'm just looking at this and it looks like it changes by $5. In this case, an increase. But let's say you flip the lines, $5 is still the correct answer. It's just an inferior.
Yeah. But even in the case that you interpret it like that way, it would still be, if it's absolute value, it's going to be positive, and that's the whole point, is it is positive, right?
Yeah, but
as opposed to the other one, which
with the quantities decreasing, so it has to be
Couldn't you still say though it changed by that much?
That's what I thought. Yeah.
The absolute change is still the same. Like how much?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I get what you're saying. So you're just saying that it would be better if instead of saying how much, right, if it said what is the change in the quantity, or what is the change in price?
To give you an example, if you go to one where it decreases, if you were to word the problem and say, hey, it changed by $5, draw the new line, two correct answers. Go $5 up or $5 down, and it still changed by $5.
Yeah, no. I get you. So the language "how much"
is an absolute term, is what it's referring
to. Yeah. So the how much kind of implies that you're just talking about the magnitude, not the direction.
Now we all know for Ignithium, when it says how much, it wants a exact.
It wants the direction of the change as well as the magnitude. So that's fine. But anyway, so I'll go back to my story because I'm almost finished with this bullwhip effect stuff. So the thing is that a lot of businesses, because the contraction was so sharp at the beginning with the shutdown, they like shut down like as though they were going to be shut down permanently, right? So send all the workers home and, like cancel all their supply contracts and everything like that. Well, now they're starting to start back up because, as you guys know, COVID is, almost a handled issue. I say probably like by May, but, I understand people may disagree. but no matter how you look at it, things are doing a lot better than they were doing before. So now they're trying to restart all of these supply chains, right? So they had this what is amounted to a kind of like permanent decrease in their supply. And so this is one of the reasons why people are really worried about inflation, right? Because the ability of manufacturers and suppliers to meet the demand because they reduced their supply is going to drive the prices up, while it is also the case that, you know, the quantity that's going to be transacted in the market is still going to be less. So anyway, yeah, it should make sense that prices go up and quantity goes down. And I totally understand the confusion of the how much. So I think that is a good comment. And I'll tell you what, Richard, if you want, it would help me. Go ahead and send me an email and just, you know, summarize your comment, because I think even though, like, we know, like you said now from our practicing and the rest of it, that the magnitude matters. And I think that is consistent with other things there. I still think maybe the language could be improved. And so I might be able to, you know, select some different questions or something like that, just to make sure that doesn't happen to people. Yeah. Okay. So you were the one that was chatting about that how much part, right, Richard?
No, that I chimed in.
Oh, that was
thing is Richard.
yeah.
It was Mitchell.
Okay, Mitchell. Yeah. So Mitchell, go ahead and email me.
Okay.
And I'll see. It might be possible, because the problems aren't supposed to be tricky, and that's, you know, hopefully something. So I'm looking at the practice now, or actually now there's the practice. Did any of the practice come out with negative numbers or no?
I don't remember, and I also want to say if you reload it enough time, it might switch which side it throws the lines on. I don't know if it does that or if I'm just confused. I generally only do the practice once, so I don't remember myself.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, because so here's one where the shift is on the other side. So yeah, so the magnitude and the direction matter. So if I can think of a way other than just, you know, telling you guys, telling everybody, of trying to make that clearer, then I will. But otherwise, that is where we are at. So moving on. So are there other quick questions? That was a good question. Okay, no. Okay, so what I want to talk to you about mostly today is something that I just pulled up. So just make sure that you guys can see this. So you guys can see the Blackboard course right now, right?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. So I don't know if you have or you haven't downloaded this demo problem, but I want to point out that if you go under assignments, there's this by hand assignment. If I click view and complete, it should give me the dates someplace that it's due, but let me go back. So it may be on my version that it's different, but I can show you all. I'll just do the edit part and then cancel it. It's due on the 25th of February at 11:59. Okay. So I'll distribute this recording, so, you know, consider it officially announced, and I'll just go back and cancel out of it. But I'll go back to the course information, and here's the document. So I'm gonna have to stop sharing for a minute, and then I'm pulling up the document, and I'll share that with you, just so you all can see it. Okay, and share, there, share. Okay, so so you guys can all see the document that I just pulled up now from Blackboard, right? Is that yes?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. So obviously you just put in your last name, your first name, and your section number. You guys are either section 8 or section 9. And then you'll see that there are these graphs from Ignithium. And then the instructions are really straightforward. These are based on assignments that we've already done on Ignithium. So it's draw by hand the supply and demand graph. Please include all relevant information like the axes, labels, so price and quantity and so forth. And then you identify the original equilibrium price. Now, obviously, you guys can't see because these aren't interactive, but you can kind of guess. That one looks like it's about like 42, and the quantity looks like it's about 14, right, for that one. So for example, and that's fine because again, and you would put your answer here, market equilibrium price, and then you would write, like it looks like it's, $42, and market equilibrium quantity, we said, so 14, and that sort of thing. And you go through and you answer the questions here. So this one is about a price floor, and this one is about a price ceiling, right? And then, you try to quantify the surplus, and you just put all your answers like that. And then what you want to do is you want to literally get a piece of paper, and you want to draw the image, the exact same image you see here. This is just, a pure tactile exercise. Though I will tell you that and then you want to, once you draw your picture, you want to take a picture with you draw your graph, you want to take a picture with your phone and then paste it into this Word document. Here's where artistic ability does account for something in this class, because it has to look good. Now I want to tell you, this is a preliminary exercise based kind of to get you started with what will be 3 other more substantive exercises that are additional homework assignments for this class, so beyond Ignithium. And it turns out that these types of assignments account for, at the end of the day, I think about 30% of the total homework points available in the course. So it's not insignificant. It's not something you would ever want to skip. Most of the examples that you're going to be doing are pretty straightforward. So not quite as simple as this. In the future, what you'll be doing is you'll actually be selecting your own graph from Ignithium, and then taking the screenshot and pasting it into the document, and then discussing it. And because you'll be working with a live graph at that point in time, and you'll actually have specific numbers that you'll put in here that correspond to your graph. It won't be kind of like just a take a look and eyeball it type thing. But this assignment is to give you an example that you can go through that's very straightforward. So you just kind of get the workflow of like, okay, what am I supposed to do with these types of assignments? So I'll kind of stop there and I'll ask, does anybody have any questions on what they're supposed to do on this type of assignment? And the other thing I didn't mention is, at the end of this, when you turn it in, obviously, you save the file as a Word document and you submit it to the Turnitin link. And then your assignment's complete, and then it will be graded by hand, and takes like a week or 10 days to grade them all by hand. And then you'll be able to see your score on Blackboard. But yeah, so I'll ask again. Does anybody have any questions about this?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you
Okay.
just fine. Who's talking?
Kimberly?
Hi, Kimberly. How's it
Hi.
going?
Good, and you? Sorry.
Good.
So my question is, so we just have to answer the questions for those graphs and then just draw the same graphs?
Yeah. And again, like, I know the assignment seems almost so simple as to be like, well, why are we doing this? We're just like copying the graphs that we already put there. And it's only because this is just kind of like, and if you'll notice, it's marked demo assignment. So the idea is just like, okay, this is the very basics of how we do these types of assignments. It's only worth, like 10 points. I think I didn't add up all the number of points, but I think that they're like, maybe it's like 12 points or something like that. But it's supposed to be very, very simple. And yeah, does it answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So if at any point in time this seems complicated to you, then you're just overthinking it. It's supposed to be super simple. And I think, Marlena, you're here, right?
Yes, I am.
And you're going to talk about this a little bit in the SI session, right? Or
Yes. So
Yeah.
I have one SI session I see at 2 today, and then another one tomorrow at 4. And yeah, in both sessions I can go over this.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, this is just to get you all used to doing these type of assignments. And Marlena's, a great source of information. And yeah, so that's it. Okay, so and if there are more questions, you all are obviously welcome to ask, but I'm not gonna spend any more time on it. It is supposed to be super simple. Okay, so I'll go back to the option, share screen. Okay. Okay, here we are. Okay, I'm going back to Ignithium because the other thing that we have on our to-do list for this week is we got practice and homework for assignment number 9. So I'm pulling up the homework for number 9. This is our welfare basics, okay? Practice number 9. And I want to point out, as you'll note, that so there are only 5 questions on the practice, and there are 10 questions on the homework quiz. So basically, if you go to, let's see, our YouTube channel playlist, and a lot of times people ask, they're like, which one is this? So see where it says welfare and exercise and principles. So this one likely has, like we're doing right now, stuff about the assignment itself, some of the questions, and then this consumer and producer surplus and market efficiency. So all these 3. Now this one's obviously longer, and so you might benefit from watching the 2 shorter videos on market efficiency and consumer surplus first. But if you want something, and there's undoubtedly overlap between these 3 videos, you can watch the longer one in more detail. But the gist of it is that, and I can go ahead and do a new share really quickly and do a whiteboard. What we're interested in is these concepts of consumer welfare. And so this is the one place where, or not the only place, but one of the places where the language might kind of deceive you, because we use the term welfare in a very technical sense. So let me ask, let's see who's here. Okay, Ryan, are you? Do you have your mic?
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Doing good.
Okay, good. So if I say to you welfare, what does it mean to you?
Like the word itself, or like?
Yeah. So if I tell you like economic welfare, like what is it? What is it? Where does your mind first go?
I guess like supporting the
needy.
I don't know. I can only think of it really in the sense of the program.
Yeah. So we have these programs like at the federal government level. They're called general relief is one of them, and one of them is aid to families with dependent children, and we call that welfare. And do you know why?
No.
Yeah, so you probably remember, like around the time of the Great Depression, if you know a decent student of history, that there were a lot of reforms put in place. I think almost all of them were under the administration of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR administration. They started like the Social Security program and these other programs to help out the poor and the needy. And at the time, so there's this part of the Constitution, I think it's the preamble of the Constitution, that says to provide for the general welfare. And they used that language to provide for the general welfare, right? At the time of the Constitution was written, they were just talking about the general well-being of society, right? They weren't talking about the government giving money to poor people, right? Yeah. But the politicians kind of seized on that language and started to call these programs where money is given to the poor and the needy welfare programs, and it stuck. But the word welfare existed long before those programs ever did, and it just means the idea
to ensure the welfare.
Well, yeah, to ensure the well-being is what we say a lot of times in economics, or the general welfare of society. And so in economics, we call all of those programs, and if you think about it, this makes a lot of sense, right? We call them transfer programs, or sometimes we'll call them income transfer programs, because it's more descriptive, right? I mean, you don't really know, neither do I, if somebody who is a recipient of, aid to family with dependent children, they get a check from the government. We don't really know, are they better off for that or not, right? I mean, most people would like to say, oh yeah, of course they are, but we don't know, in fact, that we're actually making their well-being better, right? The only thing we really know is that we're transferring money to them, or we're transferring income to them. So a lot of times, to be more descriptive, economists will call them income support programs, or they'll call them transfer payments. And you know why they call them transfer payments, right?
Well, you're transferring, I guess, one person's income to someone else's, essentially.
Yeah,
someone who needs it more.
You're taxing, right? You're taking, I mean, literally, you're taking money or income from one person and you're giving it to another. So you're just transferring income between these different members of society. So when economists first started talking about economic welfare, this was before FDR's programs. So our language is still the same. We mean measures of economic well-being and you know, in a broader sense. And we have a way that we measure it. And our measure for economic well-being is total surplus. And if you've already seen or have had an econ class before, you've probably heard of these terms. And total surplus, a lot of times, is broken down into consumer surplus, plus producer surplus. Now, so a lot of times you'll see, I don't know, have you ever seen this equation outside of this class, Ryan?
With surplus, no, I don't think so. No.
No, okay, that's fine. And I want to point one other thing out just to save you guys a little bit of time. So it also turns out that, and I'm not going to explain this right now because it'll be explained in, you know, the next week or so. So this last part is often left out in the beginning, and it comes back later, and then people get confused. And the reason is that total surplus equals consumer surplus plus producer surplus. I don't know about you, but to me, that's pretty easy to remember because there's a lot of symmetry to it, right? TS is equal to CS plus PS. I can remember that very easily. But if you throw something else in there like tax revenue, then it breaks the symmetry and it's harder for me to remember that. So anyway, I hope you won't forget because it'll just make things a little bit easier. I'm going to move this up a little bit. So how do we measure consumer and producer surplus? Well, there are a lot of different ways and things that we'll do before we get finished, but to get started, I'm just going to draw a little line here, and I'm going to put P star. You can see there's the equilibrium price, right? You good, Ryan?
Yeah.
Okay, and then I'm going to highlight two areas. So all of this area here, which is below the demand curve and above the price that the consumers would pay, which is in this case, the equilibrium price, right? All of this is consumer surplus, okay? And so let me get a little bit there. Okay. And this area here, they're triangles, right?
Yeah.
At least in this case, they're triangles. This doesn't always have to be a triangle. It's normally either a triangle or a trapezoid, depending upon the specific case. And all of this area here is the area above the supply curve and below the price that the sellers are receiving for the good, which in this case is the equilibrium price. That's producer surplus. Maybe I should move my arrow around a little bit. So producer surplus. And then obviously, or maybe not so obviously, but I'm going to point it out here, right? We have this equation that tells us if we just add up those two areas, we get total surplus. So it's pretty simple as that, right? So we can measure consumer surplus and producer surplus as the area of a triangle. You can see like the height of the triangle here if I had a specific number, right, for P star, and one for the vertical intercept of the demand curve, which is the choke price of the consumer, right? I can measure that distance, and then the base of the triangle is just going to be the equilibrium quantity, right? Can you see that? Because
Yeah.
down here, right, I have Q star and Q star, and then you know, it's supposed to be clear, but just in case you don't see it, this distance along the horizontal axis to Q star is the same as the distance here, right?
Yeah.
So I can measure the base and the height of the triangle, 1/2 base times height, and get the area of that triangle. And the one other thing that I'll point out, you know, which may not be obvious, I don't think it matters on anything because you don't have to enter units, but consumer and producer surplus, because it's a price, which is a dollar amount times a quantity, these areas are going to be in dollars. That's going to be their units. So I don't know, have you ever heard anybody say something like this in you know, listening to the news or whatever? A lot of times it comes up when they're thinking about regulating a brand new industry, like you know, the marijuana industry was recently opened up in California, right? And I don't know if you've ever heard people say things like, oh, you know, the marijuana industry is worth 380, or it's going to be $380 million in California. Have you ever heard stuff like that?
Yeah, like it's $1 billion industry.
That kind of thing. Well, actually, what they're talking about, if they're economists saying that, is they're actually talking about consumer surplus plus producer surplus. They're taking measurements and, you know, projections of demand and supply, and they're calculating these areas. So that's what they mean when they say it's like, you know, $1 billion industry, that sort of thing. Just, you know, by way of note. Okay, but now I want to discuss something that's related to what we talked about. And you'll find this in the Ignithium questions, because I looked them over. And again, it's in the lectures, but you know, it may be difficult to draw out because I'm not sure there are any questions exactly like this on the practice, even though they show up on the homework. So pay attention. Okay. So there's our demand, and here's our supply, right? Now, I talked about this as being the overall market, right? And we said there's a market equilibrium quantity, which represents, you know, if I tell you something like, you know, in the state of California, you know, 100 million pounds of marijuana are transacted in a year, right? Or bought and sold in a year, that would be like the market quantity, right? And so I want to do a different color there. So if we're trying to measure the whole impact of the market, measuring the market quantity makes sense, right? But what if I'm interested in you, Ryan? And we'll just assume, for sake of argument, or it could be me, right, that we're active participants in the marijuana market. Okay. Are you on board with me, Ryan?
Yeah, I get you.
Okay. So, but guess what? If this Q is is 100, then you're somebody like, let's see if I do this as a nice arrow. You're somebody that's buying one of those 100 pounds, right? You're like there on the line. I don't know if you're the last one or the first one or whatever, right? So let's say you're buying pound 33, right? So are you with me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now it's kind of interesting, right? Because I can say, oh, okay, well, let's take a look and say, how is this affecting Ryan's welfare? How much consumer surplus is Ryan as an individual consumer getting? And that information is on the diagram. All I have to do is I go up, if it's Q is equal to 33, I go up to the demand curve. And remember, I don't know if you remember this from another lecture or not, but because it's one of the things that often we say in passing until we get to this point. But the height of the demand curve there is going to be some value. Let's just say it's, you know, for sake of argument, $1,200. Okay. So what that means is whoever, but we happen to know the identity right now, it's you or it's me or it's whatever. The person that's buying that 33rd pound of marijuana is willing to pay at most $1,200 for it. Okay. So that's how we measure the value of the marijuana to that person based on their personal consumption desires and needs. You know, notice if the price was a little bit higher, then, and I'm gonna try to just get this. Oh, it's not letting me grab the arrow, so I got a little bit there. So if the price was just a little bit higher, guess what? You wouldn't buy it anymore, right? Because notice how a higher price corresponds to a lower quantity. That person gets pushed out of the market if the price is higher. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what we mean by your willingness to pay. And we normally call it your maximum willingness to pay because, you know, obviously you're willing to pay less, but at most you're willing to pay $1,200. So that's the kind of like intrinsic value of the good to you. And if the price down here is something like, I have no idea what a pound of marijuana costs. Does anybody know if my numbers make sense?
Well, I get the idea.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, let's just say
You could say
the
800.
Let's just say the market price is 400. I have no idea. So it's 400. Then there's this difference between what you have to pay as a consumer and what you're willing to pay. What you have to pay is the market price. And that is the benefit of the market to you. That is your personal consumer surplus. Okay. So CS for individual consumer. And then you can kind of see, right? If we add all of those up for all the consumers in the market, right? So for that consumer and 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 that consumer, you see how we get the area, the total. I hate to say total consumer surplus because you kind of gets confused with total surplus, but it's an aggregate of the market level consumer surplus if we add those up for all the individuals. Do you see what I mean, Ryan?
Yeah.
Yeah. So likewise, for an individual producer, we have an analogous concept of the individual supplier's producer surplus, which is the distance between the price they receive for the good. And this is where we interpret the supply curve as representing the cost of production. And to be technical about it, because it matters later on in the course, this is what we call the marginal cost. You can just think of it as cost of a individual. I gotta get my individual unit. And so notice that what's going on here as we go across or up the supply curve is that the suppliers that are supplying units at the beginning, right, they're the low cost suppliers, right? And some of the suppliers have costs of production that are so high that they never even actually end up producing the good because their cost of production is above what the market price is. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But so for an individual supplier, you know, and I suppose to take this back down, let's see. So for an individual supplier, the one that supplies the 33rd unit, they get to sell it for a price of 400, and their cost of producing that unit is something like, let's say, $200 per pound, right? So again, we can measure their individual producer surplus as being that distance between their cost of production and the price that they have to pay. So I'll just write that PS for individual supplier. Okay, so you have to keep track of these two different concepts, the difference between consumer and producer surplus aggregated for the whole market and those of an individual participating in the market. Okay.
So if they're selling at the equilibrium price, then the red zone would represent kind of like the profit margin.
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you one thing that's really, yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? So if you sell it for 400 and it costs you $200 to make it, you make a profit of $200, right? If that's what you mean by red zone, you mean the red arrow here for the individual producer that we're talking about.
Yeah, well, or the area.
Well, the area would be for all of those profits for all of the producers, right? Like we did for the consumers with all the individual arrows there, right? Like showing it adds up to the area. Yeah, this is like the profits aggregated across all of the producers. Now, I'll tell you one thing that's a little bit of a slippery issue, and that is that technically speaking, producer surplus is not profit. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the course when we define profit, but they're super closely related such that when producer surplus goes up by $1, profit goes up by $1. So they're connected one for one. The difference, and again, we'll talk about this a little bit later, is because this is the cost of a particular unit, it doesn't consider fixed costs of production, right? So for example, if you've got a big building and you're growing marijuana, in this marginal cost, we would only be counting how much additional cost did you bear for producing that 33rd unit. Well, the additional cost, even if you didn't produce it, you'd still have your building, right? And your building would still be generating costs for you. So this is more like, you know, like the cost of the water and the seed and the maintenance for growing that plant that gives you the 33rd pound. But when we consider profits, obviously those what we call fixed costs of production have to be subtracted off too. So if you want to think of this as being profit, it's totally fine, but just put a little asterisk next to that in your mind that it's not exactly profit, and we'll talk about that more later. So is that fine, or are you?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, so now I want to go ahead and stop sharing, and let's go back to Ignithium. And so how much consumer surplus is created in the market depicted? Well, you can see where the triangle would be, right, Ryan? And we could get that from these points, the equilibrium point. Do you see what I mean?
Right.
Right. And it says how much consumer surplus is created in the market. So that's the whole big triangle, right? How much producer surplus, whole big triangle, right? And I don't know, I might, you know, if this was my quiz, I might refresh that one because it's, you know, I mean, I could see it there, but you know, I might like a better graph. And then total surplus is those two areas added together, this big triangle. How much consumer surplus does the first consumer to purchase receive? So now we're talking about the other concept, right? So now I have to go, and again, this might be kind of bad, but let's see. Oh, there's one unit right there. I can pick it off, right? So now we're talking about that second concept. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. So for the total surplus, do you not really need that p-value? I mean, you don't really, you just take the area of a triangle, really, right? Like there's no.
Wait, which question are you talking about? Question number one?
I don't know if there's one that like particularly asks
how much consumer surplus is created in the market, right? Like this one is consumer surplus market. That's the triangle.
But the total surplus would be the total distance between the total triangle, basically.
Yeah, so like this one is total surplus, right?
Yeah.
Number 3. Yeah, so that's consumer surplus plus producer surplus, which is this big triangle here.
Okay.
And the one thing that you might be getting at, which I think is probably like one of the places where you might want to be a little bit careful. And let's just see, homework quiz. So this is the practice. Yeah. So obviously, like you were saying, you can measure like this big triangle, right? And you don't have to like break it down into the consumer producer surplus. It's just like there. But you might want to check your answer, because that's where you could get some rounding error. If Ignithium, I mean, if you were doing it really precisely, they should just match, right? but if you break it down in consumer and producer surplus and then add it back together, you might end up, being a little bit off.
So you just take the y-intercepts rather the starting prices and then the quantity for the equilibrium, correct?
Yeah. That's what I would try and see if you're close enough that it doesn't throw you off on rounding error. You're absolutely right. And this is one of the things I would say here is that if it turns out that because of, like, again, a little bit of rounding error, you're a tiny bit off the outside, like the 1 penny margin, don't worry about it, because when I download the data later, I'll open it up a little bit and that would fall in. But I am just a little bit hesitant because I'm not sure how Ignithium is calculating this, if it's breaking it into the 2 triangles and then adding them back, or if it's just taking the whole triangle. But if it was done properly, they should be exactly the same. But as soon as you start to work with real numbers, then
there could be some differences.
There could be like tiny differences, and because the precision here on Ignithium is set so tight, I don't know. So you might want to play with it a little bit on the practice. Remember how we do the practice, we get the answer, and then so like we can do this one really quickly. Let's see. Okay, do you have your calculator?
Not with me.
You have a phone. You have
right.
You have a calculator app on your phone, don't you? Okay.
Right.
So this base here is going to be, we can see it's 119 minus 34, right? That's the base of the triangle. And then the equilibrium quantity is 17. So whatever that is, it's like,
so that's 85.
Yeah, so 85 times 17 times a half, and what do we get?
It's 722.5.
722.5. I'm going to submit it, and then I get this. Okay, so I'm going to go like this and copy it, and then I'll go back to a random one, and I'll just do that to get the calculator. Oh, yeah, boom. So that's right on.
Okay. Yeah, so that's what I was just making sure, is that for the total surplus, you don't really need to actually incorporate, or you don't need to split it into 2 triangles or.
No. But this one, remember, this one's different because this is, again, for the first consumer. So I have to go and I have to say, okay, there's the equilibrium price, right? And the willingness to pay is 83. So it should be 83 minus 66.67, right? And again, there's the equilibrium price is here. So, I mean, you have to refer back to that graph that I showed you a minute ago. You're measuring the distance between the equilibrium price and the willingness to pay of that first consumer. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then this is the 5th one. How much producer surplus is created at Q star? So these are a little bit tricky. Okay. So I'll try to help you out with this a little bit. So here, I think that the right answer is going to be 0. And because Ignithium, I think, is talking about for the producer that sells the very last unit, right? So here you see the equilibrium quantity is 14.67. Again, imagine it's like millions of pounds of marijuana or whatever the units are. But whoever produces that last pound, right? Remember, the height of the supply curve is their cost. So if I can get right on that, yeah.
So there's no surplus.
Yeah, for that producer, because it costs them $60.33 to make it, and they get to sell it for $60.33. So let's see. I'm going to put in 0, and there we go. Right. So that one's a little bit tricky. Let me see really quickly. 4, 5, consumer, blah, blah, blah. If there are any other ones that are a little bit tricky. Okay, so that's fine. How much surplus to the last consumer? So again, we're talking about the last one. What are the gains from trading the first unit purchased? Oh, okay.
That would
So
just be the y-intercept of the blue line minus the y-intercept of the red line, correct?
Well, it's the first unit, right? And that's actually at 0.
Oh, so that would, okay.
So I'd have to go to unit 1. And so what they're trying to show you here, and maybe again, you'd want to get a little bit better graph, you can see a little bit better, but the point is that the total distance, it's like a slice of total surplus, kind of like what we did with the individual consumer surplus and the individual producer surplus for a particular unit. But if you add those together, the distance going straight up from supply to demand, that gives you the total amount of what we call the gains from trading, right? When I supply that first unit, I get some producer surplus as the producer. And you as the buyer of that first unit get some consumer surplus. Add them together, and that's how much we're both benefiting. Because if you think about all these transactions, what's going on is there's somebody in society that has a cost of $28 for making this thing, whatever it is, a widget, you know, a cell phone, right? And there's somebody in society that values that at $105, right? So when they trade with each other, they're both gaining, right? The person that has the cost of $28 is, you know, what is it? $74 is the transaction price. It's the equilibrium price. It costs them $28, but they're selling it for 74. That's, like you were saying, profits to them. And the consumer values it at 105, but they only have to pay 74. So if you add those up together, those are the gains from trading. Now, I'll tell you, we're running a little bit short on time. So let's see if there's any other that are these are all about gains from trade. So this one's a little bit tricky too. So what are the gains from trading half of Q star? So there's Q star, right? And then over here, it's going to be like half of it. One of these points is going to be that divided by 2. So it looks like it's that one, right? So this is one of the ones that's a trapezoid, right? Because they're saying it's all of these units up to this, and then it stops there. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So this requires a little bit different calculation. They're saying, yeah, we want the gains from trading half. This includes all units in the range from 0.
So it'd be the area of the trapezoid.
Yeah, the area of that trapezoid.
So you'd just be using a different formula.
Yeah, exactly. And so the last thing that I wanted to say is I wanted to talk just a little bit more about this gains from trade. This is kind of a little bit counterintuitive, but this is really what makes like markets valuable and why they work. If you think about it, let's think about something like maybe like a car repair, right? So my wife, she always gets synthetic oil for her car. And, you know, I think probably like the cost of the synthetic oil itself is probably about, about $30. So it'd be like appropriate for this example, right? So why do you think she goes to, the Pennzoil, Easy Lube, or the dealer or whatever, and pays $105 to do that when it only costs, them like $30 for the oil?
Well, you're paying for a lot of other things, like maybe an oil filter, installation fees, and
yeah. Well, I think the main point is that, and you're right, but let's just say that the oil filter and all that stuff is like their actual, like the dealer's cost, including labor, is like $28, right? Well, you're right. Like their business is organized so that they have a really low cost, right? Like if I wanted to change the oil myself, and I used to change oil myself in the car all the time, but you know, I remember the first time I went to go change my own oil, you know, many years ago, change my own brakes and stuff like that. I had to go out, and I mean, I didn't have to, but I did. You know, it just makes life a lot easier and it's safer. I went out and I bought some wheel blocks for my car, and I bought a hydraulic jack, and the hydraulic jack cost me like, I don't know, like $250 or something. Well, that first oil change is pretty darn expensive for me, right?
Yeah.
Because I had to like set myself up to do it. And I actually I stopped changing my own oil after I broke my hydraulic jack, because I didn't want to go buy another one. You know how I broke my hydraulic jack? No, right?
No.
Right. So I had a big pine tree in my yard. I cut down, and there were huge roots, and I was digging the roots out. And so I got a clever idea, which was to push out some of the roots with the hydraulic jack. So I put the jack underneath some of the roots, and I jacked and jacked and jacked and jacked and jacked and jacked and jacked. And sure enough, it moved, but after a little while, it just popped. And not the roots, but the jack. So anyway, the main point is, yeah, I mean, in some sense, you would say like, well, gosh, why would I pay $105 for something that somebody out there it only costs them $28? Like, am I getting ripped off? And the question, the real answer is no. Like, everybody is specialized. They have, you know, their mechanics are trained, or their personnel or technicians are trained. They know how to dispose of the oil. Like, they have it all wired in. So they're creating value through specializing and producing something at a really low cost relative to what other people could do, right? You could,
Yeah.
in a sense, think of like do-it-yourselfers like me as being people way out here on the supply curve, where I don't ever actually transact in the market because my costs of doing it myself are just way too high.
Yeah, or you might not have time to do it yourself.
Well, yeah, and part of that is opportunity costs, right? That's like, you know, I'm a professor. I write papers, I produce lectures and stuff like that. That's my specialty, and that's what I have a low cost of producing. And if I don't, you know, if I'm going to spend an hour of time, would I rather, you know, spend that time more wisely doing research and, like, you know, promoting my career, or would I rather, you know, go out and you know, change my oil? So, which,
Right.
you know, yeah. So, yeah, I stopped doing most car repairs a while ago, after, you know, I got miscellaneous scars on my hands and stuff like that. And I've almost killed myself under a car before. So that's yeah, there are costs, and I'm not the best one to bear those costs. Anyway, okay, so I'm done, and I'm gonna